So in my sea of stuff, I have several boxes of just old ribbon cables. It looks like I need a 40-pin IDE cable to see if I can use that to hook this up. I went through a larger box a few minutes ago and didn't find anything appropriate. I know that an IDE cable from an old IDE hard drive is 40-pin, and I'm sure there's got to be one in here. That is a 40-pin IDE. It's awfully long, but in this case I would simply, if it works, cut the cable down, put another 40-pin IDE connector on the end. But let's see what else we've got in here. That's really long again. There is a piece of about, I believe, the appropriate length for what I want to do. However, I don't believe it's 40-pin. It's not. That's interesting. I think it's about 36. So that's a no-go. That's obviously a 50-pin. That. Too many cables. It's starting to get confusing. This is 42 pins. It's too wide. Another 36 pin. I'm actually surprised I'm not finding. You know, it may be that this connector is wider than I think it is on the board. Let's take a look. So it is labeled 1 to 20, which tells me it would be a 40-pin. That actually right there is the right one. I'm making an assumption these are on 0.1 spacing, and it looks like they are. So I think we found our cable. Verify that's the one I was just holding, and of course it's not. I've got too many loose cables on the bench here. Let's go back and compare that one more time. Now that is the right one. Set this aside. And I'll dig here a bit just to see if there's a shorter one in this box. Little floppy cable, which will be 34 pins. That's definitely too wide. And let me throw all of the ones that are no back in that bin. And we'll take a dig through a second bin. As you're maybe starting to realize, I never throw anything away. That's 34-pin floppy cable. It's 50-pin for 8-inch hard drives, I believe. That's floppy cable again. Floppy drive cable again. Floppy drive cable. Ooh, if that was the right width, it would be perfect, but it's, of course, not wide enough. This is an IDE cable. It's actually got the grounds between every other pin, and it's actually keyed. There's missing pins in it, so even though it might be tempting to use that, I think we've just found our cable, although the ends are crimped different than I would like. I'll have to think about that one. And there's another that is appropriate, but just way too long. And this is another one of these. Again, one end is on opposite, pointing the wrong direction, I believe, for my application. It's an LV SCSI cable. Well, I've sorted through 3 boxes, a large one and the 2 small ones. And picked out the ones that are the closest. And we'll take a look here. Let me get the keyboard unit itself back down in frame. And we'll talk a bit about this. I don't believe there's enough room in the case for the IDE connector to come on this way. I believe it may have to come on this way, although there wouldn't be sufficient room for it to really be clipped on. I don't think there's enough space between the boards necessarily for it to be connected underneath. This is going to be interesting to put together. Of course, the processor board sits down in the case this way, and the keyboard sits above it this way. I don't think there's going to be enough room. Well, there might be for the cable to go. So another consideration here. Let's see if I can get one of these shorter, or one of these other ones where the connectors are on the same way. So another consideration is if the cable was attached to this way, and the printed circuit board was, say, on this face, this row is, oh, I got to think about this. This row does it become that row on the other side or that row? Boy, I'm going to have to break the ohm meter out and think about this a bit. In what I saw on the web, the other guy that used a IDC style cable was he had to use the upper row on one side and the bottom row on the other where there was continuity through. We're really only going to use one row of the connector, and we can see that this is a keyed cable, and I can't tell if that's a plug. If we were able to use that row to that row, we'd be okay. And now that I see that's a keyed cable, I may avoid that one. That's actually a keyed cable. I don't know if this guy's keyed or not. Get the tape off and take a look. And it appears it's not keyed. So I do believe this will be our donor cable for this. As you can see, it's potentially way too long. I'm going to need to bring up the case, sit the unit down inside of the actual bottom of the case, and take a look at clearance in various places and see where these IDC connectors could rest. So with the processor board down in the case, it looks to me like I have sufficient spacing this way. I may have to remove the bridge bar off of here. It's a strain relief bridge bar, which would narrow this connector down. Oh, sorry, that wasn't in camera. There's a bridge bar across the top of this IDC connector, and it's used to create strain relief. So this entire plastic up here can come off, which may actually increase the room a bit down inside to allow this to fit in better. in looking at this, slide the board up and I can slide the cable up underneath, and I can see already that in that configuration I really don't have sufficient room inside of there. Let me go ahead and take the little bridge off. If I can get him to pop loose. Odds are I'll break it trying to pop it loose here. There's one side. There's the other side. So you can see that size-wise, we've taken quite a bit off and we've narrowed this down quite a bit. Now I'll sit that down in there. We'll see what clearances feel like. It's certainly better, but not optimum. So the question now becomes, rather than slide on this way onto the connector, do I reverse the pins so this would actually slide on this way and the cable would be looped around like so? I believe I have sufficient clearance inside of this piece to do that. The question will become clearance on the keyboard side, although I do suspect there might be enough room to come in this way and yet wrap around to the bottom. The main PCB and come in backwards, like I was kind of trying to demonstrate there. Let me put the spacers back in here and set the keyboard unit down inside, and we'll take a look at spacing that way. There's the keyboard. It's down on its posts. Well, we can see there's plenty of room inside of here. Large amount of room there. If this cable were slid on, underneath, yeah, there's not enough clearance there. Even if that got up tight, I don't think there's any way for these to face forward. So now the question becomes, off the bottom, this comes off the bottom of the keyboard. And then the cable loops around, and this is on the top. Well, it's actually the bottom of the CPU. I do believe there's plenty of room in there to hook that up that way. And it would give me clearance with the ribbon cable. I probably want to make the ribbon cable 3 or 4 inches, although that's probably too much. So I'll maybe dig for some pin headers next and kind of try to test fit this, and we'll see what happens. So did some digging on my parts bin, especially the one for pin headers, and found a couple of these right angle pin headers. They are single row, but for this application that'll be fine, because again it's single row on the 2 boards. I had originally intended to go with this pin header on the back of the board and wrap the cable up around. Something I didn't think about, and of course it's now jumped out and got me, is there really are no pads to speak of on this side of the board. There's the a little bit of where it was plated through, I don't feel like I can get a good solder joint putting the header in from the back side and soldering down through. I will not get a good fillet on the other side of the board. So I'm going to have to rethink this a bit. And I believe I'm going to have to bring the pin header in from this side. See if I can get it down in there. Hard to do this stuff with one hand when you're reaching around the camera. I think it's going to have to come in from this side. And then our little ribbon cable actually does have enough clearance to get on there, simply because the connector is so high. I will probably transfer this capacitor to the other side of the circuit board to make room for this, and I'm pretty sure that'll clear the inside of the case. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Get this guy back up out of here, out of the way. And I will remove that capacitor and move it to the back side of the case. Rather than break out the desoldering gun and do all of the work to desolder this, I'm going to go ahead and desolder that capacitor and transfer it to the other side of the circuit board. Add a little bit of fresh solder. And although the board isn't real stable in this configuration, I should hopefully be able to get enough solder out of there to cleanly remove that capacitor. We'll find out. And of course, had a lot of there we go. Both sides are loose. There's lots of lead length on him. So rather than fight to pull that down through, I'm just simply going to trim off a bit of the lead, so I can just drop it on down through. So something I need to be careful of is get back on camera here. If I leave the leads really long, when it folds around, it will short onto other components. So I think what I will do here is, first off, go ahead and straighten these leads out. This is just a small ceramic disc capacitor. It's a 0.1 microfarad. It's most likely there just for despiking. As I will try this. Just bend the leads around and see if I can get sufficient clearance that I'm happy with that. You know, that'll work. Not the most beautiful move, but this will get this connector off the other side of the board, or this capacitor off the other side of the board. So he's getting him tacked in place. We'll get him off the other side of the board to make room for that displacement connector. You know, he's sufficiently in place. And I'm going to go ahead and flush cut both of these. So that is the proper one. It's got the proper width to it to sit on there. I will tack him into place. I'm going to do this, and of course you can't see this off camera, is I'm going to pick up a little bit of fresh solder on the tip of the pencil and just let it transfer off the tip of the pencil to that pin, and to, if it'll transfer, that pin. Those will get resoldered, but what that gave me was enough to hold it in place. Let's see if the cable will slide on in that configuration. It actually won't. Well, it will. It's just a bit of a battle. Actually, I think that'll work okay. I don't intend to be taking this apart. Oh, I didn't do that on camera, sorry. I was test fitting just to make sure I can get it on and off, and it's a little tight, but I think it's sufficient. As I said, I won't be taking this apart all the time and putting it back together. So I need to, of course, solder that up. I'm looking for my higher magnification glasses. I'm working from a bit of a distance, so seeing is a bit of a problem. We'll get in here and flow these. Yes, you're watching me solder. I know it's quite exciting. That did not take solder. You know, I guess I could put a little flux on this, but I'm really soldering too. It's interesting that these don't really have any connections coming to them. Those couple of pins. Neither does this one seem to, and I believe, well, I know this was completely single-sided on the other side, so there are apparently some unused pins here, but I will still get some solder to flow down into the plate through, just to add a bit of mechanical strength. There's really no stress relief the way I'm doing this, and I wouldn't be surprised through use if I didn't get a cracked solder joint here that would cause keyboard issues. But again, I am intending to use this machine to modify. So I'm back down to one of the end pins that I tacked it in. That looks to be a power pin, the wider trace, and then I'm going to go back to the first pin I tacked down and go ahead and flow it, and it's got a wider trace as well, so I'm guessing I've got power and ground on those two outside pins. I think that looks sufficient. Envision the ribbon cable coming off this way and then coming around onto the other board. We'll see what this looks like in practice and make a decision about which side the pin header should go here. The pins are not into the pin 1 slot, which means I want to end up, let's see, pin 1 is there. So I'm going to want to end up on the bottom board. What looks like it'll work well for me is for just to be down onto the bottom board in this orientation, and there's plenty of gap in there to put that in that way. I will need to shorten this pin header down, cut it right there. Again, the pin 1 marking is to the bottom, the pin 1 marking is to the bottom. That should get me proper. So with the connector on the keyboard and a path forward, I'm looking at how this is going to mount onto the back of the processor card, and I think it's going to come on this way, and then the ribbon cable will just essentially be able to push up underneath and in. Pin 1 is to the bottom of this connector, And with this connector rotated around this way, pin 1 is the bottom as well. So we should have proper continuity through there to make all the connections. I've got the connector on here in place. It's a little bit loose. I will once again have to tack the end pins in place. Let me get the pencil out and cleaned up a bit, and just pick up some solder, just enough there to capture that pin. Enough here to capture that pin, and the pin got warm and my finger was touching it on the other side. So looking at the connector, I think it's in a reasonable position. We will turn this around here and go ahead and solder it up. Of course, I've made a fair amount of assumptions here about how this is going to work. Hopefully what I've got is reasonable and will actually work. It would be my luck, of course, that it won't, and I'll be unsoldering something. And with these traces being somewhat delicate, the more you solder and unsolder, the higher the odds that the copper will lift off the board, and then it becomes an ugly kludge to fix. But we'll find out. This connector again will suffer the same way the other one was. Mechanical flexing and stress may well crack some of these solder joints and cause erratic keyboard operation. So I've hit the two ends where I originally tacked it down. Get the solder rolled back up onto the roll, and we'll see if this fits together. So here is the bottom of the case. Go ahead and sit the board down in. Reposition things a bit so you can see the connector. My hope is that I can simply slide him on that way. And wrap that ribbon cable down and around. See if I can get you a view down inside of how the cables have ended up. It's not the prettiest kludge I've ever done, but I think it will be workable. It'll give me a way of easily separating the keyboard from the main board to make it much easier to work on. I won't be dragging the keyboard around on a loose cable. I think a little bit of work here on this ribbon cable to get it kind of bent to the proper places will go a long ways. So I will mate the two together. Get the spacers back in place. Try to keep the camera from wandering around on its own. Spacers are in place. Fold the keyboard up over. The keyboard lays down flush against the spacers. There's plenty of clearance in there. All I can do next is go power this up, and if I'm lucky, everything was right and it'll power up and we'll have a working unit. We'll find out next. So I'm downstairs where the monitor and everything lives. I've got the reassembled unit here. I've got the video cable in hand. Video cable's plugged in. This is the cable from the power brick. Power switch is off. Get this plugged in as well. Can never remember which way is. There it is. Up or down. Give the monitor a second to warm up. And all appearances are we have an operational keyboard. This enter key worked a second ago and now it's not working. There it is. Okay, so is it a bad contact? Not any keys yet that don't work. 15, next X, 20, go to 5. Little computer should run, which it does. Break, go through each key. GHJ, KL, clear, Z. We know the space bar was working when I typed in the little program. Shift is working. The other shift is working. Got some keys on the numeric keypad that actually aren't working. 7, 8 is completely non-working. 9's there, 6 is there, 5, 4, 1, decimal point. So I'm going to have to go in, most likely, and look at the schematic. Now, we did see it kind of wake up here and that key work. I'm just kind of flexing the cables around here that I've attached. See if a little mechanical stress. Clear. So troubleshooting this next. I know the enter key was originally working. You know, it may actually be the missing key here. No, that wouldn't make sense because it would not work at all. I don't honestly know if these are normally open or normally closed switches in here. If they're normally closed, the missing switch could cause keys on that part of the matrix to fail. I had been thinking they were normally open up till actually thinking about it here. I may go retouch up the solder joints. There's actually something else I can try here. I'll try that and be back. I was looking for the top cover of the computer and couldn't find it, and I'm hoping. So we are seeing some interference here with the ribbon cable. I'm sure it's this high pump here getting in the way. I will go ahead and reverse it again. It's a little tricky to get off this side. It kind of interferes with the chips there. And reverse it again. And I had it on which way before? I know I had the red stripe to this side. I believe I had it coming over the top this way. Oh, that was not good. Pretend you didn't see that. I left the power plugged in, and the keyboard actually touched the incoming power and powered it up slightly, and hopefully I didn't just fry something doing that. That would be a disaster at this point. Get that tucked up under there nice and tight. Which is the way I originally bent the cable to go in. And yeah, the top sits down fine. There's a little bit of pressure onto the cable there, but it's nothing bad. So that does clear. Doesn't, it's not perfect, but again, for something I'm going to be hacking, please don't be fried. Thank you. Nice. So this first little hack's going to work. My standard test program. Should get you up here where you can watch me type it in. That might be more exciting. Oh, is backspace not working as well? So we got 3 keys not working. No. Yeah. Break 10. Print character string. Oh, this is going to be fun because I like to make lots of typos. Print character string X without a return. 15. Next X. Wow, I'm really fumbling here. Run. Now I want to do 20, go back to line 5, run that, and we'll just let it sit here and burn in for a bit. So we will jump into removing the 3 defective keys and cleaning the contacts and reinstalling those and seeing if we can bring those keys back. But for my first hack on easily being able to separate the keyboard and the CPU, I think we've got a success here. So I hope you found that instructive. Maybe it's something you'll want to attempt. We'll talk soon. Bye. So a quick follow-up video. After much playing and determination to actually fix the existing key switches, I was able to remove the enter key, the 4 key, and the 8 key, and took the key mechanism apart and back together a bunch of times and tweaked until I understood essentially the proper tension. Internally, got them working, reassembled them. Just so you can see here, there's the enter key, scrolling things on the screen, and of course the numeric 8 key and the 4 key. So the keyboard is now fully functional. I will not be removing any more keycaps from it since that created quite a mess. I did find some replacement keys on eBay for the TRS-80. A numeric pad. I'm hoping they're the right key switches. They have the keycaps on them, which means I should be able to replace the 0 here because it's got the keycap and the switch both, and then have some extra switches, extra key switches. The ribbon cable is working well. It is a little tight in the case with the top on. It does create a bit of a, well, I say that and then it drops down on pretty well. I think generally it's going to be fine. Anyhow, You watched me for, I think, 25 minutes struggle to make one of those work. And I fought nice and hard. Was determined not to give up. And I have a working system. So, given the simplistic nature of what I did, this may not be a good day to jump in and do deeper hardware mods. We'll see. Anyhow, if you got to this point in the video, I appreciate your watching. You must like pain if you watched that far, but you know, it is what it is. It was definitely a real experience breaking the keyboard and getting it back into working shape. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll talk later. Bye.